Okay, so what we're doing is we're looking at chapter 1 in the Engaged Sociologist. And let me tell you why I chose this book. And I think this is really important as to why I chose this book, is that this book talks about sociology being cool. It's a cool academic discipline. I mean, it's really, one of the things that we look at is how much fun we can have on this, and also it helps you figure out how society operates and how do you want to create social change. And so, as I was lecturing earlier to the intro students, one of the things that I was talking about was the fact that really a lot of sociology was about how do we address social problems. And so sociology is formed in this idea of how is sociology operating, how is society operating, and how can we create social change. And one of the aspects is that I like about this book is, number one, it's going to come back and give you a little bit more information about sociology, about the theories, about how do we know what we know, which is research, creating civic engagement, socialization, all these different themes within sociology. And we also, in teaching sociology, and in particular public sociology, that we're teaching you what you need to know to become an effective member of society. And the other thing that I think is really important in this is why we need sociology to do this work. I have a lot of students who come in and study sociology, and then they go on to get their degree in social work. And one of the reasons is because they really enjoy the aspect of reading the sociology material and talking about what can we do to enact social change. One of the reasons I chose this book is because in the book, we have a section called Sociology in Action. And this is actually your homework. You are actually going to be doing this as your homework. And how do we learn to write letters to our politicians? We learn to figure out how are we going to be able to help our community and our neighborhood. And so as you are going through this book, a lot of these are class activities. I'm not making you go to get institutional review or anything like that. I just kind of feel like you need to understand what is real public sociology and what can you do in sociology. Yes, there are those of us who are professors, but in some levels, some of us, even as professors or before being professors, have evoked social change in our world. And so I think that, what we a lot of times perceive too in sociology is that we come to this place thinking it's just a discipline. We're only studying about it. Sometimes we don't even know how we got interested in it. So I think that it's important that we look at how people come into sociology too. So we know that sociology is the scientific study of society. And as sociologists, we see how we are shaped by our own experiences, by our personal micro level experiences, and by the macro level experiences. So 9/11, I can tell you where I was and what I was doing and what was happening. And I vividly remember it. And I know what I was wearing. And I mean, it stuck with me so much in where I was in my life. I can also tell you where I was when Kennedy was shot, which is a big deal because I was really only about 18 months old, 16 months old. How do I know where I was at 16 months old when Kennedy was shot? Well, what I know is that um, the the thing is, I don't know. I only know not from my experience, but from my mother's experience. So my mother can tell me where we were and what I was doing on that day. And so that is a little different as well. So that's a little different as well. So one of the sorry, I have a little kid that just walked in. Close the door. Thank you. They they're learning at home. We did not send them to school. They know they're not supposed to be here when mommy's in class, but you know it's just a great great distraction for little kids to come check and see what mom's doing because they hear me talking, right? But they don't know who I'm talking to. They don't really understand it. So I think it's kind of interesting in that the children are going to school just like you are, and they're going online or we're doing workbooks and different things. And so they're interested in how is mommy doing this when mommy's teaching a class and we hear mommy, but who is mommy talking to? And so it's a very, they really want to know. They're very curious. Um, so when we're talking about, you know, our individual perspective of where we are and what's going on and what's happening in life and what in the social forces is really happening with us and to us, which is also different. We are, you know, we start learning and we start seeing this what we call the sociological eye. We're looking at it through a sociological lens, and we can see how our culture has also impacts how we think. So our culture impacts who we are and how we think. It also impacts who we are from our perspective of our gender, our race, our religion, our goals, our sexuality, our education. All of these different things are shaped by society that we grew up in. And so when we start looking at society through a social world model, we can look at the different levels of social structure, the social units. So we can look at the small micro to the large scale parts that interact with each other. So if we're studying participation in the democratic process, okay, so we currently have a U.S. presidential election that is coming up. If you notice that Biden named Kamala Harris as his vice president running mate, and the world has been abuzz about a woman of color, and and she also is Indian and Black, and how she's identifying that she is the first Black female vice presidential candidate. By the way, we've had a woman, it was Shirley Chisholm actually ran for president, but Geraldine Ferrara ran for vice president. So that's been very early in my life. And so, we've had people running for president as females, but, no one running for vice president since Geraldine Ferrara. So I think that's kind of an interesting perspective. But if we're studying participation in the democratic process, we might want to look at political activism on the campus. We might want to look to see, do we have a college Democrat and college Republican club? We might want to look to see, does the Democratic National Party and the Republican National Party, are they active within our area? So we might look at all of this different stuff. We might choose to look at it from a global perspective or a national perspective, but all of this is concerned with how our social groups connect. And so using the social world model helps us see that we are influenced by, and we can influence our friends, our relatives, the political party, the political process, the nation, and the global community. And this also allows us to see patterns that work against certain groups, that create disadvantages for certain groups, and then thus creating institutional discrimination, whether it's intentional or unintentional structural bias. So we basically functioned with a Supreme Court for over 200 years that had no female on it. And I can remember the thrill of being a female in college when Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed a Supreme Court justice. So it was a huge step. In fact, in college, I was not even aware of the fact that I had the option to become a lawyer, or that I could eventually become a judge. I was not even initially aware of that. Eventually, I became aware of that after Sandra Day O'Connor was named, but I did not know any female lawyers. I did not know any female judges. And I had this conversation with a couple of my girlfriends who are my age. We were in first grade together, and I said, and they're lawyers, and one's a lawyer, one's a judge. And I said, when did you realize that you could become a lawyer? And I said, because I know you were not a law student, you were not in law or legal or anything when we started college, and we actually lived in the same dorm. So she said, when it struck me, she said, when we were all sitting watching TV and Reagan announced that he was appointing Sandra Day O'Connor to the Supreme Court. And I thought, wow, where we were and what we were and who we thought we were, the fact that we were there and saw the first one changed people's perspectives at some level. It really helped move the process forward. Now, is it good? No. Is it still kind of crazy? Yeah. But I can tell you now that women in law school is much, much, much higher than what it used to be when Hillary Clinton went through, when Sandra Day O'Connor went through, when Justice RBG went, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when she went through. And so now we have a higher number of females going, almost more than men at this point. And that's very fascinating, right? Because what we're looking at structural bias. And so we know that there's structural bias from the gender perspective. And then, as we've talked about, then there's all these other additional layers of being a woman of color, or being a person of color, or being an indigenous person, or being an immigrant. There's so many other layers, so many other layers. So when we talk about this idea of sex discrimination from the Supreme Court, one of the aspects that we say is, was this intentional, or was it unintentional? Well, realistically, our culture uses similar language and ideas to talk about leadership qualities and masculinity. And if you listen to what is being said about Kamala, she's ambitious, and as a female professor, one of the things that I always find so fascinating is, yes, I am ambitious, and that's a good thing. And so, sometimes you'll hear men still say things about, well, you shouldn't be so ambitious. And I'm like, why not? I should just sit back. So, we still have this discrimination aspect and this judgment aspect from a male perspective, because a lot of the words and the ideas that we use to describe leadership qualities and masculinity, we term those into negatives on females. And so we do not imbue them with the same idea of what leadership qualities are. So, we have, now we look at this and we have more ways to really focus on what are we doing in sociology. We have core commitments in sociology. And using our sociological lens is one of the core commitments. The second is social activism. And when we understand how society operates, we must participate actively in efforts to improve it. And what does that mean? Well, that means, I think we come back to, if we see something, say something. Our sociological lens forces us to see social patterns in society and to use these visions and views to become more engaged citizens. And so once we start seeing the world through this, we're able then to practice effective and constructive social activism. So one of the things we talked about, we have Black Lives Matter. There were protests of the Keystone Pipeline, and if we think about the protests during summer, the protests were not just in U.S. cities. I mean, it was incredible to see the global response of protesting for Black Lives Matter. It was touching to see that in the middle of a pandemic, as we had thousands of people out in the street, to see that our friends across the water were out protesting as well for equality and for justice for us. I think that's extremely important, that we have justice in that perspective. And so you see that it's a global commitment to justice. I think that's kind of a fascinating uh, way of looking at this. That we're expected to make positive impacts on society. And actually, as faculty, and I don't know if you know this, but as faculty, as your professors, we are actually required to do this. And you're like, well, that's just crazy. No, we're required to make an impact in our community. We're required to participate in our community. We must participate in stuff that goes in, happens in and around Albany. Why? Well, especially as a sociologist, this impacts me from a perspective, a lot. But we think about this also from the fact of we have to make our community better. So, this comes into, we're also trying to create social change. One of the things, if we look at what happened during the hurricanes, if you were here during the hurricanes and tornadoes, and how everybody, really, there were a lot of people out making sure homeless had somewhere to go, that people whose homes were damaged, that they had somewhere to go, or we were able to fix them quickly. The Tide truck came in to do what? To make sure that people could wash their clothes. Um, People took water. It was just, a bunch of the sociology students, we volunteered at the Civic Center. We took up a collection and bought pillows and blankets. We did a whole lot of different things like that. So, what are we doing? We're looking to create action. We're looking to create, um, you know, the trying to create social change. So, one of the ideas of sociology, um, I want you to kind of, this is really important, because this really has a lot of how we look at life. This is one of the reasons why I had you guys do sociology in the news, as you were coming through intro and social problems and some of those. If you took me, you did gender in the news and sociology in the news, and social problems in the news. But one of the reasons that we do this, and that I have you do this, and Miss Bennett, as you do this, is we want you to look into, the idea of what is going on in the world, and then you can look at it from a personal perspective to relate it to public issues. And you also need to learn what information sources are trustworthy. And so, this is one of the ideas about making sure that you also have good information when you are doing your work. So you've got to use scholarly sources. Now, we have our question, our first question in our discussion. I'm going to share this. And so we have our chapter 1 homework assignment, which is not due until next week. So the question is, how is higher education related to democracy? And if you live in a democracy, have you inherited certain social obligations? And what are they? And what do you think they are? And should you vote? I think this is huge right now. And should you go to college? And so when you're thinking about this, Answer the following questions. What is the purpose of higher education? Again, why did you decide to go to college? Do you guys see what I did? I'm just saying, you look at this. If you've seen these questions before, you will also be using them here. Okay. Do you think your college education will help you become a better citizen? So now, then you'll go to this web page and you'll read the President's Declaration on the Civic Responsibility of Education. And then you have some other questions. Now, I'm going to tell you the best way to answer this because I have it right here. Copy the questions, put them in bold print, and complete the answer underneath each question. So I would copy these questions, and then I would put them in a Word document, and then I would bold the questions, and then I would answer them underneath. And I would use double space, 1-inch margins. That's what it's asking for, Times New Roman font, 12 point. So what I think that you should really do is focus on doing this and your career in sociology paper. So I'm going to show you, here we go. Why did you decide to go to college? Do you believe your degree will help you? Why or why not? Have you seen that before? Have you seen these before? So now I've just asked you in 2 different documents the exact same questions. So you're kind of getting a 2-for-1 on this deal, guys. So you're getting to use 2 questions and answer them in 2 separate activities. So I think that will help you out a little bit in writing this. So we've been in class for about 45 minutes. We have about 30 more minutes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the sharing of the screen. And then what I want to do is see if you have any questions. And then I'm going to let you go so that you can do, if you've not done your discussion one, so you can do it. And that if you have done it, you can actually start work on your career in sociology or your homework and do some of it, do a piece of it. So I would answer those first 2 questions to see, the same 2 questions and kind of get those right that you'll want to do. Okay, I'm going to check roll again. I'm going to make sure who's here. Okay. 1, 2. Okay. Okay. Awesome. I have everybody. That's great. So now, are there any questions? And I'll answer the questions if there's any questions. If not, I'll tell you farewell and see you next Tuesday, and go forth and do good work in your Georgia View. Questions? No questions? So I'm going to say everybody wants me to dismiss them. Okay. We're dismissing class. You have about 30 minutes to go work on your questions for your career in sociology paper and your activity 1. Okay. And I will see you on Tuesday. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Bye.